All right, welcome everybody to this week's edition of UGA Sports Live. A much better looking edition this week, if I do say so myself. Addition by subtraction, if you get what I'm saying. No, we do miss Roddy. He's on vacation this week down at Orange Beach. And by the way, if you want to rent a condo, give him a shout. He's got a great place down there to check out. Do want to get into a lot of news today, but first we've got to thank our sponsors. Classic City Eats over on Baxter Street. They are reopened, fully cleaned, ready to go, ready to serve you up. I had some chicken just last week. It was awesome.
I was about to say, you went over there after the show, right? I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, it made my Tuesday a lot better. It made me feel a little bit more normal, you know. So if you're looking to get back to normal, go get you some good chicken tenders and some fries. Dip them in that hickory sauce, and you'll be all right.
You had a beverage when you were over there. I know you too good to know that you didn't.
I did not. I actually did not the other day.
My gosh.
I was kind of in and out. I was just picking up. So now I want to give a shout out as well to Athens Ford, a great sponsor not only of our show but of the website. They do a great deal out there, open for business totally as well, and got some great financing deals that we can talk about later in the show. Your Pie and Academia, two of the best restaurants in Athens and around this area. Make sure to get out and check those guys out. They're doing great things in the community, plus making it easy for you to come pick up. And don't forget our boys over at Aaron Overhead Doors. We appreciate them as well. Big sponsors of the show and big sponsors of the site. Get your 10% off when you tell them that you're a UGA fan. I know that I don't know who else is doing that, but I think it's a good move on their part. And like we always say, even if you're not a Georgia fan, go on there and get it. And as long as you admit to your fandom, they'll accept it. So
if you'll sell your soul for 10% off a garage door, they're there for you.
That's right. Hey, garage doors not inexpensive, so it definitely worth your time. All right, let's hop right in today, Dane. Big news broke just before we came on the show, about 45 minutes prior to us launching here. And that was the commitment of Chaz Chambliss, 4-star outside linebacker from Carrollton High School, out there in Carrollton, Georgia, a little West Georgia action. Not exactly somewhere that Georgia's been drawing from very much. I believe Patrick Garbin said this was the first kid from Carrollton that had committed since Reggie Brown.
Wow.
20 years ago. So, but yeah, huge news there. Dane, I know you dabble in a little bit of all of it, recruiting team, video, running YouTubes, Zooms. Any thoughts on the pickup for Georgia with Chambliss?
My first gut reaction, and this is a bit because I used to work in Columbus in TV down there, so a lot of the teams in Columbus would play up toward Carrollton, and so you kind of get some connections from that. West Georgia is owned by Dale McGee. That's really my first reaction to it, is that this is just another pull from Dale McGee in recruiting, and he knows what he's doing on that side of the state. Carrollton has really good athletes, some really good football players. I think you're going to continue to see more players from that Carrollton area find their way to SEC schools. And there have been some recently. I mean, Emory Jones, the quarterback at Florida, is from that area as well. So, it's just another piece in Georgia's defense that we all expect to have some attrition in upcoming years if the defense continues to perform at the level that it has been. When you perform well, when you get in these big bowl games, when you start having guys taken in the NFL draft, you're going to have guys that leave earlier. So you have to retool that defense even sooner than you might think. You know a little bit more about Chaz Chambliss than I do, but from what I saw on tape, he's a really aggressive player. And I think that's going to be exciting for fans to see because when you have a guy that can get around the line of scrimmage and kind of take that shot, I don't know if it's a great comparison because I haven't watched as much tape as you have, but there's almost some slight Jarvis Jones tendency somewhere in just the way that he plays. Do you see any of that?
Easy there, pal. No, the thing about Chambliss, I think that kind of plays into that is very powerful, like Jarvis was. A lot of that off the edge. You see that, and that's the thing of the two outside linebacker commits that they've got in this class: Elijah Judy and now Chaz Chambliss. Chaz is the power guy. Elijah is the speed guy. Elijah probably more adept at that hybrid role, possibly even, dropping into coverage. Some of what we saw Lorenzo Carter do a few years ago, just because he's a little bit more fleet-footed. But I think that when you're talking about Chaz, you're talking about a guy who's a third down specialist, comes in, able to play with a hand in the ground if he needs to. And I think what you mentioned is important, Georgia retooling and restocking that defense. But I wrote in my what it means, what's next. I really don't see a situation necessarily where you're calling on Chambliss early in his career. I think that there's still enough depth ahead of him that he's going to have time to develop and figure out exactly where he fits in. Because I mean, he's a big kid. He's 6'3", probably pushing 255 now. Will he trim up and stay, standing up, or is he going to be a little bit more with the hand in the ground? I think Georgia's got some time to figure that out and see how the body will develop through collegiate strength and training, because he's definitely one of those tweener type bodies. But I do like the pickup for Georgia. This is a kid who widely recruited, has been on the radar 3 or 4 years. I feel like I've been covering Chambliss forever already. You mentioned out there in Carrollton, they had Kevin Swint, who ended up at Clemson. Swint was a guy that we covered extensively, but it was always, you always talk to Swint, you always talk to Chambliss when you saw them together. So, a guy too, I think people will appreciate his attitude. Mentioned to Chad Simmons in his commitment story, he said, "Hey, look, I'm not doing this for people to follow me. I'm not doing this for Twitter. I'm not doing this, for the hype." He said, Georgia's where I want to be. And I think that he's very clear with that. So, I think people appreciate that approach to in the world of recruiting that can be a little saturated with the attention and the all the tweets and such like that. I mean, if you go look at Chambliss's Twitter, it's pretty barren. I mean, it's like once every 2 months or something it'll pop on. But
he'll have to fix that if he's going to be recruiting other guys. It seems to be the trend now, right? In recruiting.
I really don't think he's going to be a guy doing that, except for maybe next year. And that next year is a pretty key year for his school, because they got MJ Morris out there, who's one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best young quarterbacks in the state for next year. And I think Georgia really likes him. Gunnar Stockton, obviously, as well up at Rabun County. Everybody likes him. But, I think that having Chambliss and that Carrollton connection kind of revitalized can't do anything but help Georgia's chances there. I'm not saying they're the favorite at all, but you got to think that having a guy from the school who can get in there and, kind of give some of that inside insight and play host on visits, just a familiar face. I think that always helps in recruiting and gives kids a good window into what's up. So
when I said that about Jarvis Jones, though, let me reiterate what I'm kind of meaning here, because I understand how that probably came off. When you watch the tape that I saw, you see Chambliss being trusted a lot to kind of pick his spots. A lot like Jarvis Jones was allowed to prowl around the line of scrimmage and then just attack. It was a one mindset thing, and Jarvis was obviously elite at doing so. I'm not saying Chambliss is going to be that. I'm saying that he's earned trust from his coaches based on his athletic ability to kind of have more leeway in determining what he's going to do in a certain play. Now, that comes with sometimes being at a little bit smaller school, but like we said, there's great athletes at Carrollton, so it's not like he's playing with a bunch of scrubs out there. That's not the case at all. But he's a guy that has earned his coaches' I guess trust and respect. I mean, even in his commitment video, you see him in the middle of the huddle before a game, getting the team ready to go. That's the kind of guy you want on your team. Whatever role that turns into, you'd like to have the energy that comes from that position. And, he builds trust from his teammates and coaches. So, I think it's a good fit for Georgia.
I agree. I think that you're the stalking at the line and the ability to kind of pick and choose his spots, definitely something that comes with the experience that kid's had. And when you're talking about Chambliss, again, like I said, I feel like we've been covering him forever. He's been to all the highest level camps. He's not only, Carrollton, like you said, plays good competition. It's not like they're lacking out there, but this is a kid who's competed on the national stage via 7-on-7s, via various Under Armour and Rivals camps and the like. So, he knows the level that's expected. He knows what's going on. And like you said, I think that's earned him a lot of trust from his coaches, and rightfully so. I think that's a good decision on their part, certainly. And Georgia's got to appreciate having a smart kid like that, up front and being able, like you said, to pick spots. And I think that, you give the kid a year in the weight room, you give him some time to work that body out, and then give him the chance to watch film, get familiar with SEC tackles as well. I think that that's going to benefit him as well. So, like I said, I don't see it as a pickup necessarily where Georgia's relying on him early on. And I don't know, outside of maybe Brock Vandegrift for this class that I've seen a guy necessarily that I'm just, blown away and saying, yeah, this guy is the answer. He's going to be the guy when he gets here. It's not like Jalen Carter, who committed around this time last year.
You would kind of mention how he might fit in around with Elijah Judy in this class, kind of going broader from there. How do you think this works out for Georgia's defensive class coming up? Because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty with which players return and which ones don't from the juniors up in the upcoming season.
Yeah, and I think that this is an especially important class for Georgia to go heavy at that linebacker spot, whether it be outside or inside. They really kind of went light there last year. Mikael Sherman, kind of your only guy there. So this is a big year for them in that regard. You want to bolster the numbers, certainly build the depth up. I think that Chambliss, like I said, good player. I don't know necessarily that he's a first off the bus kind of guy. Or a first day starter or anything like that. But I do think that he's a kid who can get in, earn some solid playing time and be a very interesting prospect. He's not quite as big as Bill Norton, but I kind of see that similar body type. He's not as tall, but, Bill was playing at about 265 when he was in high school, now pushing, I think, almost 300 here at Georgia. So I think that, Chambliss is going to be interesting to see how that young body develops.
Jamel Major in the YouTube chat asked, when are the bigger chips going to start falling in recruiting? And I don't know what bigger chips he's referring to. The biggest chip I would think is Amarius Mims, but you're more the recruiting guy than I am.
Yeah, Amarius, it's completely undetermined at this point. I mean, I still feel really good about Georgia's chances with it. Don't get me wrong there. It's just that we don't necessarily have a clear idea of when that might go down. Initially, I think he was shooting for sometime in October. Looked like he was going to do, I think, like a birthday commitment kind of thing. Since then, that seems to have been wiped from the internet. So that leads me to believe that perhaps there was some second thought in that regard. But it's like marlin fishing. That's what I always tell people. It's when you're going after guys of this caliber, you got to just sit in the chair and reel for about 4 hours. It's they're not coming out that easy. And I think that that's especially true with some of the guys that Georgia's targeting in this class. I mean, you still got a number of 5-star kids. Tony Grimes is another one you're looking at. And it's not to say that there aren't other competitors for these guys. I mean, and that's going to be the case throughout. But as the Bulldogs have shown, I think pretty much time and time again, that they're going to get in there, they're going to fight until the end, and they're going to be pushing for the biggest guys when signing day rolls around. You can bet if there's an unsigned 4-star out there or an uncommitted 4-star, well, hell, commitment's not going to matter. But, you can bet if there's some guys kind of lingering out there around signing day, things could get pretty interesting pretty quick. And I mentioned this a couple weeks back. We talked about it on the board as well. I think that people need to continue to be patient with Georgia's recruiting strategy because they've got the ability to be very selective and kind of slow even in their process when it comes to picking and choosing their targets and the kids that they'll take. That's because of the depth that they've got on the roster, the talent that they've got on this roster. And I think it affords them the ability to kind of wait out the recruiting shutdown that's been going on, host kids back on campus, get a chance to, get in there and kind of find out where everybody's head is. You weather the storm of the decommitments that I guarantee you are going to happen fast and furiously when it comes to this fall. And, I think that from that respect, Georgia's placed themselves well. You got 8 commits now. You're probably looking in that, you're going to push for 25. They're going to try to do that every year, certainly. But I think that this is a situation with Georgia where, they've got the ability. Why not wait it out and wait out your bigger fish?
Thus far in this class, I think one thing that you can say is that for any of the detractors wondering, why isn't Kirby Smart going after the kids in Georgia? I mean, from the coast down there with Michael Morris up to Carrollton and West Georgia, you've got around the Atlanta area with guys like David Daniel. You've got, Brock Vandegrift in your backyard. Uh, they're covering the state. I mean, if there's talent in Georgia, obviously they've known about them for a couple of years, and I don't think it's that they didn't know about people beforehand, but this class just works itself out to where, they don't need to leave the state quite as much for as many positions. And again, I think that's a point with recruiting that doesn't get made often enough either, is there are some areas that Georgia doesn't know that it's going to need players right now. And that's kind of the coach's job to determine, all right, what's going to be an area need if this happens or if that happens. We saw that with tight end last season, because I don't think it was expected that Isaac Nauta was going to leave early, but he did, and that's how it works out sometimes. But when you're doing the projections, maybe it's less likely that a guy that's in state that has grown up around Georgia, that has whatever the power of that G is, maybe it's less likely that they decommit just because it's closer to home and what they know.
Well, and I think too, one thing you've got working on your side with a lot of these guys when you're talking about Georgia is, as you said, just the familiarity. Most of these guys have visited campus multiple times. That's just obviously Brock Vandegrift can get over here pretty much anytime he wants. But Chambliss is a guy who's been on Georgia's campus, probably four to half a dozen times. The same thing is true of Marlon Dean. He can come down whenever he wants. Jonathan Jefferson's been out here to multiple games. I think that when you're looking at it from that respect, that's what other people are going to have to combat with, is this sense that, and I know we keep going back to Tennessee, and I don't mean to rag on Tennessee because what they're doing, like I said, it's working. It's drawing them the headlines, and kudos to them for it. I think that's a smart strategy. But you've got kids who just aren't that familiar with the campus and aren't that familiar with the student life and aren't that familiar with the town. And you have to wonder, when the time comes that these kids get to go back out and get to start taking these visits again, are those feelings going to continue? Are they going to wane? I think with the guys that you've got committed to Georgia right now, you've got a great degree of familiarity with all of them. And what that means as far as not only the school, but the staff, the program itself, the town of Athens. I think that overall, it just makes a lot of sense for them. And, kudos to them. I think that it's I think it's a good strategy. I said the other day, it's not the end all be all strategy, certainly, but I do think that it's an effective strategy, if nothing else.
In the overall recruiting game, I think there's going to be some interesting things on the calendar to pop up at some point. And what I'm meaning by that is, all right, let's say that the early signing day gets pushed back for this year only. It seems like that's something that coaches would want to happen just based on the circumstances of this year. But let's say that does happen. That means you're probably getting into a little bit of the coaching carousel as well, where coaches are making moves to other places, which may mean that players have a little bit more leverage to move around in that December, January, time than we've probably had in the last couple of years. So to think that a lot of things are going to remain permanent, that's just not how recruiting works anymore. You hope you have your linchpins. I think Georgia feels very solid that they have that with the Micah Morris commitment Brock Vandegrift. This whole class is coming together after his flip from Oklahoma to Georgia. And I don't think anyone has any doubt that that's where he wants to be, and that's where he's going to be, and that's where he's going to be a superstar. So, this class will follow his lead, and he's going to be probably looked back on as the Richard LeCounte of this class, of just building it kind of from that first piece and going from there.
I will say too, I think that there's a degree of it with Vandegrift and you go back to Carson Beck the year before, Justin Fields before that, Dwan, well, not Dwan. Dwan was a signing day guy, but Jake Fromm, these guys, when you can find that centerpiece quarterback, that inevitably draws in a lot of eyes. And I think that certainly getting Brock did that for Georgia in a big way. But you said the Richard LeCounte of the class, and I'm saying that the guy who may be Richard LeCounte's eventual replacement is the guy who is the Richard LeCounte of this class. That's David Daniel out of Woodstock. He's been solid. as a rock for Georgia, has been out there recruiting. If you get on Twitter, there's probably nobody more active when it comes to chirping at other guys and saying, hey, yo, we need you here. So I think that it's a good look for them. You know, they've got a lot of guys who are very active in it. They've really, of late, kind of weaponized the players. I know that,
and former players too.
Yeah, we've seen some of that. You know, Tyson Campbell tweeting at Dallas Turner, who's a kid now to watch at that outside linebacker spot, 4-star out of St. Thomas Aquinas down there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A big-time player, Georgia all in on that kid, Alabama as well. So continue to watch that. And actually, you can go over to UGAsports.com, check out all the stuff that we just put out on Chambliss. We got the film review, we got the behind the scenes, and we've got what it means and what's next. And the what's next kind of evaluates, here are the next couple guys that you need to be watching. And there are some really, really talented pass rushers out there that the Bulldogs still want to get their hands on. Again, some of them not as familiar because they haven't had the opportunity to be on campus, but I do think that, you know, once this thing opens up, you've heard a lot of guys say, you know, Georgia is one of my first stops as soon as this is over. I think that you'll see some action very, very quick.
Chip Crook says in the YouTube comments that Roddy's not here, so that means here come the commitments.
As always, man, listen, there's nothing that guarantees that I'm going to have to work harder than my boss not working at all. So, you know, I think that I said on Twitter too, it's Georgia's best recruiting talisman. It's the good luck charm is when Roddy goes on vacation. So
Grey Goose 01 asked how many of the commitments are Georgia boys. Now, I know you were talking about that this morning in our group chat because there's a little bit where, yeah, he's a Georgia boy, but he's not in Georgia right now, right?
Right. Yeah. So you've got 8 commits right now on the Georgia commitment list for 2021. Technically, you've got 6 in state, but I count Lavassier Carroll as a 7th because the kid's from Warrenton, Georgia. I mean, he's an hour down the road from Athens, grew up there, played there his whole life, and just transferred this past season to IMG. So I'll still give him the nod. You know, if you want to get into technicalities, you can call it 6. I think 7 makes more sense. The only born and raised non-Georgian is Elijah Judy. So, and even then, I mean, you know, he's got the Philly connection, so there's some red and black blood running up in Philly right now with thanks to Mark Webb and DeAndre Swift in the long term.
Yeah, and those fathers up there that work out every day and send their kids to Athens.
Man, I don't know what dads are doing up there in Philadelphia, but I do want to give a shout out to our friends at Ford. Maybe they're pushing a Ford in this shutdown with the gyms closed. Athens Ford, get over and check them out. 706-222-7845. How you can reach them. They've got pickup service available. They've got delivery service available. They've got pretty much everything available that you can think of in order to make your experience the easiest and the most non-contact as possible. Don't forget 0% APR financing, 84 months. On select Ford models. That includes the 2019 Ford F-150, as well as the 2020 Ford Explorer, the 2019 Ford Ranger. Basically, you got your choice of a number of vehicles that'll apply to. And who doesn't love to stretch it out for a while? I know I do. 0% though for qualified buyers. So make sure you go check that out. And don't forget the lifetime powertrain warranty over there at Athens Ford. That's one of the things that I think makes them so special from others. It comes with every new vehicle, but even your pre-owned vehicles under 80,000 miles are going to have that certified pre-owned, or I'm sorry, the lifetime powertrain warranty on there. So give our friends a shot at Athens Ford.
Yeah, great location there off Atlanta Highway just to go kind of check it out. And even if you're not ready to buy, just go talk to them and say, hey, I'm trying to see what's out there and see what my next move is.
Yeah, just cruise through the lot. And, you know, and while we're here, I hesitate to do this because no one should be drinking and driving, but while you're out there, you might as well swing by Academia.
Do it after. How about that? We can reverse the order.
There you go. Have a little lunch, get yourself a cold beer. They make a great lemon pepper wet wing out there that I had the last time we were in a restaurant, and really enjoyed that. Pick up some beer though to go. They're always producing new stuff. They've got the patio open out there. They've got the dining room spaced out appropriately. So academia out there serving all your needs. Go see our friends. Make it a little double stop, Athens Ford and Academia while you're there.
You know, Academia was already spaced out really well. You always kind of felt like you had your area in there, and they were really big tables, which I loved just because it was kind of private. And then now to kind of the extra space that they've added, just because they have space for it. I mean, when you walk in Academia, you're seeing the brewing of beer happening kind of behind you. So it's got like half of it's kind of the beer brewery warehouse and half's the restaurant. And it's, a really cool space if you haven't been out there. So if you're looking for that first restaurant to kind of dip your toe in the water and get back into the dining out world, I think Academia may be a good first stop for you.
All right, we got several questions I want to jump into today. I know at some point, I assume at some point, we're going to be joined by somebody. I've advertised that.
We do have in about, I'd say 3 or 4 minutes, we're expecting a special guest to pop in. I have heard from him.
Beautiful. All right.
So that'll be fun. And I may try to protect myself because we're talking hard hitting defenders. We've got one planned to stop on the show.
All right, so we'll hit a couple questions though in the meantime. Dog fan in CLT, I assume that's Charlotte, checks in with us over here on UGA Sports on the Vault. He says, how do you see recruiting changing for this year if recruits are unable to take official and unofficial visits because of COVID restrictions? That is a hell of a question, man. That is
just a light question to get it off the Q&A.
I will say about that, I do think it's still my opinion, and this is just my gut speaking here. I do think that you're probably going to see them do away with the early signing period for this year. I just think that it makes sense from everybody's perspective. It gives everyone a chance to see each other a little bit more. It gives coaches more of a chance to evaluate further. It gives kids the opportunity to officially visit. I could personally see, and I don't know that this will happen, but I could personally see them even possibly pushing signing day forward, maybe in February, if things are still restricted up until the first of the year, just to give kids more of an opportunity to get out there. I don't think you're going to see them deny these kids the opportunity to take their visits because, frankly, that's how you end up with decommitments. It's how you end up with kids in the transfer portal. It's not a good look for anybody, and I think coaches want to avoid that as much as possible, certainly. But I think not only from the kids' perspective, but from the coaches, and does it fit? Do the parents fit with the program? Are the academics right? Does this kid test and perform like he does on film, in person? I think that all of those factors combined really go into making this an elongated process. I do think that you're going to see some changes to the recruiting calendar this year. What, I don't know yet, but let's see how the fall goes. If they're able to open it up and maybe have a couple of official visitors each week, I'm trying to determine if that's even feasible, to get 1 or 2 guys on campus each week. I think that the NCAA is going to have to allow some sort of ability for those guys to get in and take these visits. It's just necessary. I think. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that Jim Donnan told me that I found to be pretty insightful is that this is not going to impact this upcoming class of 2021 as much as it will probably the sophomores and juniors, because most of these guys that are on Georgia's radar, they've been to Athens, they've met the coaches. There has not been as much transition in the coaching staff as there has been in other places in the conference or even, in the region. And so some of those they can probably get by kind of knowing the relationship has been built for over the last 2 or 3 years. Where you may see the gap where there's going to be some catch up is in, that freshman, sophomore, even juniors in some cases, if they're late bloomers, of what happens with those guys. Because a lot of the legwork that would happen to where I heard Gus Malzahn say one time on signing day, you're not worried about the guys that are committing that day because you kind of know what's going to happen, except for maybe 1 or 2. You're really working on signing day for the following class because it's a good PR move that you're on the phone. In this case, for that upcoming signing day, Kirby Smart will be talking with a lot of guys from the class of 2022. The other thing is, there's going to be some guys that just don't handle the time away from structured workouts. They may lose their chance based off of that, or vice versa, that they really impress coaches and that determines, hey, we can, make a spot for this guy. He's proven he's got this kind of leadership. He's proven he's dedicated to what we're doing. So I think coaches are going to learn a lot about potential prospects from this time period.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, a guy that comes to mind when you say something like that is, it's a little bit different situation, but similar in that he couldn't get in and work out. That's Julian Rochester. I remember when he was headed into his senior year of high school, he came out to Rivals camp and had a shoulder injury, I think, from lifting, and had put on some bad weight. And as a result, and you could see, people being like, is this kid going to be able to right the ship on this? I think that certainly it's going to change things in that regard. I think also you're going to have some surprises in this class. I think that you'll find some kids in this class that people don't know a lot about, even we don't know a lot about, and maybe that even coaches only know lightly about, that end up being really good players because you haven't had the opportunity to scout. In my opinion, it's going to benefit. It'll benefit all schools. I think it benefits the smaller schools even more personally because you're going to have a chance, I think, maybe to get some kids that didn't get to take some visits, didn't get to work out in front of some coaches that maybe, you're able to identify and kind of keep a little closer to home.
I think one thing you're going to see too is that this kind of challenge really lends itself to the college coaches that have built such strong relationships with high school coaches that they can just ask them a blunt question. Is this a guy that we should really be looking at? Not getting a sales pitch from a high school coach that knows it makes them look good, but genuinely knows that, hey, based on the level of football that we play at Georgia in the SEC, is this a kid that can cut it? Because you're really going to have to rely on word of mouth in a lot of cases where these coaches can't get their eyes on someone. We're going on now for 4 or 5 months. Yeah, film says one thing, but is that going to be the same player in the fall should football happen the same way that it does? There's going to be a lot of uncertainties happening, and I think that's why you think that signing day is probably going to be pushed back as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And you got to think again, how does that benefit the team? Well, if you're looking at each team individually, I think that you obviously you forge your strongest relationships with your high school coaches in state. That's just the necessity of it. You run into each other, you see each other on the trail. They're bringing their kids to your camp. That's a huge boost for Georgia because a lot of great talent, resides in Georgia. So I think that like I said, there are going to be kids who emerge. I think later down the line that end up being really good players that nobody's even talking about right now.
Speaking of talent in Georgia, on my screen, I think he's joining here in a second. It looks like Amarlo Herrera is joining our podcast, and we're excited to have him on here.
Even very nice,
looking sharp, Amarlo. Hey, welcome to the show. He may be getting his audio searched out here for Amarlo. Can you hear me, Amarlo? Hey, he's working on it there.
Yeah, he'll get it. He'll chime in here when we can. Now, you talk about a guy we've been talking a lot about these defensive recruits today. A guy that talk about a pleasure to watch in Athens. Oh, I think that is that it.
Yes, sir.
What's up, Amarlo?
How y'all doing today?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Trying to stay alive, trying to stay healthy.
Man, you're looking sharp in that shirt and tie over there.
Hey, man, I do a little something. It's a little something. Not too much today.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on here. We did a podcast last year, and it was probably one of my favorite ones that I've ever done, just kind of learning your story. And it was on the Dog Days feed that we did. So if anyone wants to go check out, hear about Amarlo and his background, go do that. But I do want to give you a chance, just telling people what you're doing right now.
So I'm doing financial planning right now, working with a lot of teachers, athletes, former athletes, just doing my thing and trying to find, my niche in the financial world. So that's pretty much it. If you want to know more, contact me. Go to my website. It's amarloherrera.com. You can set up a time to meet. You can shoot me an email from there if you have any questions, and I'll explain more because there's so much to explain.
How many people are contacting you just to talk football though? Like, I mean, I'm sure some are like, hey, yeah, let me work on these finances and get this figured out. But how many just want to talk football with you?
You catch a few. There's a few people from time to time that might, accept a meeting, not interested in doing nothing, but really, just to meet. And then it got to the point now where people send like mail to the office, and some most of it be cards, or they might ask me to sign a card or something, and they send it to the office. And so that's kind of different.
Yeah, I can't imagine there are too many guys at your office that are getting requests for their signatures on anything other than documents very frequently.
It's weird. I open it sometime and I see a card and a letter. I'm like, God, you said something else. No, but I appreciate it though.
Well, I don't know if you saw the news, Amarlo, but there was a linebacker commitment today for Georgia, and he is from Carrollton. So I'm just curious, what would you tell recruits when they're in the recruiting process right now?
Recruiting process. It's a lot different from my days and where it is today. And so you'll have to use your best judgment and your heart on where you think you'll be more successful, where you think you'll develop more as a player, and then more as a person, a guy, a brother, father, son, where you think you'll grow in those aspects of the things. And also, where you feel you'll get the best education.
Definitely. And now, Marlo, you're in the financial planning world. I wanted to ask you about, with the name, image, likeness that's being floated around. How does that kind of factor into recruiting? I mean, a lot of people are concerned that suddenly the big dogs are going to be able to reel in guys with even more enticing offers. But I mean, how would you advise a guy to handle that?
You just got to know. I mean, obviously, if you're a big name guy, it comes with it at the end of the day, whether that's today, whether that's 3 years from now, or whether that's 4 years from now, it's gonna come with it. So you just gotta know how to deal with the money and make sure. I don't know how they're gonna be dealing with the money, whether they putting the money up for them or whether they giving it to them now. So I don't know. I think I heard they was putting it up for them or something like that. I'm not sure, but just make sure you take care of the money that you receive for your likeness at an early age, because that's way different than what was usually given. Everybody who had got money before, they got in trouble for it. So I think it's big for those guys who are going to be able to get it, and it's definitely going to be a recruiting process big factor, because I mean, you see those dollar signs, you want to go to those big programs where you can get recognized easily. So
yeah,
there's an aspect of this too, though, Amarlo, that if you're a defensive guy and the quarterback on the other side, that he's getting pretty good cash flow from that name, image, and likeness. You're gonna be on that huddle on the other side, and you want to go give him a good look, and you want to make sure he gets in the ground.
Yeah, but at the same time, you want to make sure you get into the league at the end of the day, because they're playing for it. So I think it'll be something that's good for them, but hopefully it drives the competition up.
Do you think that it's going to I mean, there's been all this talk and all this consternation about, will this fundamentally change college football? I mean, how much would a guy like you have liked to have had that opportunity when you were in college? I mean, how big could that have been?
I definitely would have loved to have that opportunity. I mean, everybody else is basically getting paid for the hard work and the labor that you put in, and then people talk about the school aspect of things. Yeah, the school aspect is good, but to be compensated in some type of way for it while you still getting the schooling, that's the the icing on top. I get school and money. Like, I would have loved to have that when I was in school, and I'm pretty sure anybody else that played college football would have loved to have, that extra money.
Sure. I mean, I think that's the thing is you don't hear a lot of people who have actually been in the fire of college football who say, no, I'm good. We're going to turn that down. I think that, when you hear from guys like you, guys who've been through the fire, it's pretty consistent. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with it. I think it's going to be very interesting. And from a standpoint of marketing, I think that it's going to really change a lot in college football. You're going to see, I think, marketing teams put together for these programs that are out there helping kids build brands and getting themselves positioned, as influencers and, even life after football. What are you going to do about that? I think that you're going to see a much bigger focus on that even than you have previously.
Marlo, one thing I'm curious about is, a lot of the current players, this is such a crazy time that they're dealing with of like not being able to practice on a normal schedule like you did for all of your time at Georgia. Do you think that you would have been able to work out and be ready for college football having to do it on your own rather than the structured practices? I'm just curious, do you think most players kind of have the infrastructure, the discipline to handle that?
Yeah, I definitely would have been able to handle it because, you have that group of players and group of friends that that you're always with, and you're gonna grind and they're gonna grind. And so it would have been easy for me and, my roommates or my friends and my
Call
social
them
group to
out.
get
Who were
together.
they?
My roommates was, Damian Swan and Malcolm Mitchell. And, my group of friends consisted of those two guys, Josh Dawson, Keith Marshall, Ty Gurley, Jonathan Rowe, Corey Moore, just to name a few. But we would have been able to, get together and still put in the work and grind and get ready for the season. So I think, the guys that's in college all know what's at stake. It's your future. So it's your future that you're preparing for. So why not go grind every day? Because, you have no school right now. School is online. So you have to grind while you can and put in the work to be prepared for when you're able to go back and practice as a team.
You listed off those guys, Amarlo. You had that picture of your tattoo that went a little bit viral, talking about some of those guys. I think everyone you mentioned is featured in that tattoo. I wanted to ask you, have you gotten any calls from anybody who was a little bit upset that they got left out of the tattoo?
Oh man, it was a few guys who felt left out, but it's my my close knit group, the group that I first came in with pretty much, and the group that was there for the full time, and so yeah, I got called out a couple times.
How special was it for those guys, though? The guys that ended up in the tattoo being featured. What was their reaction to it? What was it like for them?
They loved it. They seen it. We probably drew it up probably 4 or 5 months ago, honestly. And I just been waiting and putting it off. But those guys, they loved it. They loved it right when they seen the picture. So it was pretty special to me and for them to see that.
Now, speaking of special, a lot of expectations on Georgia's defense coming back this year. Somebody asked the other day on UGA Sports, how do you define success after coming off a year like you just had on the defense? Is it fair to measure yourself against what you did last year? Kirby Smart always says, "Hey, it's a new year. We're flipping the page." How do you kind of stack it up, and how do you kind of measure your success and set the bar for yourself for this year?
Looking at it, it's a new team every year, so you can't measure your success off what you did last year because the athletes change. More guys have experience, less guys may have experience. So the defense is not the same. So you have to measure it off of those guys and their ability and, how much time they had together and how much time they had on the field without having the spring football and all of that. There's less time for those guys to gel and be on the field together. So once, I think it's June when they're able to practice. I don't know how many will be there at a time. So it's going to be hard for those guys to gel if they all aren't there at the same time. So it's going to be tough, and that's just from experience. But everybody have to be there. Everybody have to be locked in at every moment because you only have so much time before the season now, and so it's very important. So you can only judge them by the experience and what they have with the time that they make.
You were a guy that played with a lot of instincts. I mean, you were a very instinctual player out there. Not everybody has that though. Some guys really benefit from the ability to get in there and, like you said, gel in practice. From a defensive standpoint, which group do you think that missing this gelling is hardest
on? It's definitely the DBs because you have to, even though you're in your own world, you have to be able to gel with everyone. So DBs, you have to be able to gel with the linebackers because you have to know what they're doing if this happened. What's the coverage if this happened? It might be two coverages in one play. And you have to be able to gel and get those calls down together to be able to fully function as a defense. And that's just from experience because my junior year, I played with we had a lot of freshmen as DBs, and defense broke down a lot, and we gave up a lot of big plays. So you just have to gel from those back guys.
Marlon, one of the guys that you mentioned, from your era, Ty Gurley, I want to know when he signed with the Falcons and you all see this happen, he may have told you beforehand. What was your group text like?
Well, I was one of the few that I already knew about it happening. So I was excited once I knew, and then the group knew the day before, and so it was all excited because most of us are in Atlanta anyway, and we grew up here and we're from Georgia, so it was kind of exciting to finally see someone, who you bond with, who you're friends with on the Falcons, and just not someone that's an associate. So it's kind of fun to finally see someone that I know, and someone that I love playing for the home team.
How did he tell you?
No, yeah, go ahead.
How did he tell you?
We talked about it a few times. So you hear it and then you're like, all right, it might happen, and then once it finally got confirmed, it was just like, yeah, it's about to happen.
You have you already purchased a Todd Gurley Falcons jersey?
No, we waiting. I'm waiting.
Make him give you one of those game used ones.
I might have to get one of those too. We're waiting on the Falcons to open.
A lot has been made over the years of the Falcons and Georgia and the interaction or lack thereof. Do you think that there is a little bit of an anti-Georgia bias when it comes to the Falcons?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just don't know why. I mean, it's a few guys who could have made some noise for the home team, but they just got picked over, and so it's kind of weird because you always want your home team to pick that hometown college guy, but you don't see that happening a lot anyways. So, but most people think that the Georgia and the Falcons tie should be a little bit closer, and I don't know why. Maybe because we all love Georgia so much here that we want to see everybody go to the Falcons.
Makes sense to me.
It's a lot like the discussion that we were having earlier, Jake, about how some fans get upset when Georgia takes players from outside of the state of Georgia in recruiting. We saw that a lot in the last class. But Amarlo, you're a guy that grew up not far from Athens, and you were a guy that wanted to stay home close to your family. You talked about that with me on our podcast last year. Did that kind of give you a little special extra pride to be able to say, I'm playing for my state?
I didn't look at it like that at the time. I mean, now going through it and being back, yeah, I'm proud of it. But at the moment, I didn't think about it as that because I was living in the moment. So I was like, I was happy to be, in Athens and being able to see something different and being in a different town. So that kind of gave me that happiness of staying home.
There's still some downtown Athens stories I want from you that you hadn't told me. So we're going to have to do this a few more times to get some of those.
Those are legendary.
What happens in Silver Dollar Bar stays in Silver Dollar, man.
Unless you make it to the
No, Amarlo, I wanted to ask one thing. I noted when I was looking at some stuff on your background before you came on today was the WWE tryout. I really want to know less about the tryout. What was your finishing move going to be? What would Amarlo Herrera's finishing move be in the ring?
I didn't come up with one by then, but me and a friend of mine was joking, and he's an older guy. He was like, "Hey, the finishing move gonna be the Cuban missile."
It's gonna be just like Goldberg's spear, but you call it that.
The Cuban missile. Don't know what it was, but that was gonna be the name.
I love it. Now, Amarlo, I wanted to ask you too about the, going into the season, the expectations around it, are high. They got a JUCO quarterback coming into Athens, a guy who has, made a lot of noise in the public. How do you feel like it's going to be for a guy transitioning from as a grad transfer in this time where he hasn't had the spring, he hasn't had the ability to work out with these guys, maybe a little bit limited in the summer? How difficult is that transition as far as a leadership role goes?
Those guys around him know why he came there. He came there to be a starter. He came there to be a leader of a team, and he's obviously gonna give us a great shot at contending this year. And I mean, he would never been offered if he didn't deliver that. So I think those guys that's there, they have a winning culture. So I believe that him coming from somewhere else, he'll buy in and he'll win over and be able to be that leader that he was at Wake Forest, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. So he'll be able to win people over because as a quarterback, you're a natural leader anyway. So I think he'll win over the team, just by putting in the work, just by being there, and that'll help, gel the team.
No, Marlo, your film over the years, they kind of know what you can do in football. I kind of want to test this financial planning that you do a little bit, right? So I'm 31. Just give me a basic tip of something that I should be doing right now that maybe I'm not doing. Like, if I went to amarloherrera.com, I filled out, I got in contact with you, I'm like, what's something I should probably be doing right now? What is that?
A basic tip would be to so I don't know if you do this already, to make sure that you have an emergency fund in place that's not associated with your checking and savings account, which is probably 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses. So when times like this happen, you have money to get you over and to help you doing something like this. So that's one basic tip that you can use.
Rainy day fund. I like it. ready to go. It's a classic tip, but man, it's hard to do, but if you got it, that's great.
I mean, you have to. I mean, it's just sitting aside $10 every pay period or $10 every week. You can do that. I mean, we spend more money on that than going out to eat. So you take one thing that you do every day or that you do most days, and minus that and put that in a different account for the emergency funds, and you'll build it up over time, and you'll be surprised.
I had mentioned your group text earlier. I gotta think that when The Last Dance was airing on ESPN, that you and your buddies had to be texting about that, right?
Yeah, we were.
Okay, tell me some of the opinions from that, because there were a lot of opinions happening around Michael Jordan, and I don't know if it's the Michael LeBron stuff, but I've seen Chris Burnett talk a lot about some of his NBA takes. So I want some of your NBA takes from The Last Dance.
Well, we have a huge debate. I mean, we have a few people in there that are big LeBron heads, and then we have people in there that's Kobe and Michael Jordan as well. So it was just those discussions. I mean, I think in my opinion, LeBron James is the best overall player ever, and that's just my opinion. Jordan will always be considered the greatest, but LeBron is the greatest overall player.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know what the definitional differences in those are. The greatest versus greatest overall. So you might need to explain that to me.
Greatest overall, LeBron can do everything. He can do everything. I mean, score, pass. He can shoot now. Definitely a monster in the inside. He play defense when he have to. Most of the time he do. And he's a great team player. He's for the team and for the NBA. Basically, he gelled a lot of guys around the league together.
A lot has been made over the years too of LeBron James possibly playing football and how dominant he can be there. If you were trying to cover LeBron James trying to catch a pass, how you going about it, Amarlo?
Man, he's a monster. he's a monster. Like I don't know. You just have to hope his route running isn't that good, because if his route running is fine, then he'll be a monster. Like,
well, Georgia's got an incoming tight end about his size.
Yeah, but he's not LeBron.
You ain't lying.
If he's LeBron, then I'm ready to see it today.
Let's out of here on the just with your time, and we do appreciate you joining us and just hanging out with us, man, because anytime I get to chat with you, I always have a smile on my face, and you're always so happy to do it. So really do appreciate that. But just your overall thoughts about where Georgia's program is. I know that you're a former player, but you're also a fan now too. So what do you think about where Georgia is and where Georgia's headed?
Georgia, the program right now is, we're in the same spot that we're always in. And so we're just waiting to get over the hump and win the national championship. So hopefully we can get it done this year. I think we have the tools, and I think we have the young players that can get it done this year. Hopefully, I believe that every year anyways. But I just think we just got to put in the time, the effort, the energy, and, get behind the team no matter what, win all those big games, win the small games, and go compete. Like, they had all this time off, and they know how it feels to not have football. So use that fire and go kick some ass this season.
One last thing I got for you, Amarlo. A guy you're excited to watch this season on Georgia's roster. Anybody in particular stand out to you? Anybody you're really interested in seeing?
I have a few. I'm not going to name them, but it's a few at linebacker. It's a few at outside linebacker that I want to see excel this year. So I definitely want to see those guys excel this year. I'm definitely excited on the offensive side. I'm definitely excited about the quarterback, and I'm definitely excited about the two running backs that got to step up this year. that's been there. So they're kind of the veteran guys this year that I definitely want to see. So, and then it's Pickens. I definitely want to see him.
You said you weren't going to call anybody out, but you got to name drop him.
Yeah, name dropped him. The running backs, you already know who they are. Obviously, the linebackers, the outside and the inside, you know who they are. So, but I definitely want to see, those guys excel, and I want to see the growth that they made this offseason.
Sure. Well, again, Amarlo, we can't thank you enough for just making time to hang out with us. You do it almost anytime we ask, and we're so grateful for that. AmarloHerrera.com if you have interest in some financial planning and what he's doing and how he can help you now. And if you do all that, he'll probably talk a little with you, but don't waste his time and just only talk football because, he's got work to do too, right?
Got work to do. About to get back to it.
All right. Thanks, Amarlo. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, that was Amarlo Herrera joining us on UGA Sports Live here. We don't often have guests, but he's just one of my favorites because he's just so real. I mean, and he was that way at Georgia too. If he thinks it, he's going to say it.
Yeah, I love the kicking ass part. You get some guys who will hold back on that a little bit, but great stuff from Amarlo. Great to have him on. Really glad you were able to set that up, Dane. Speaking of really great, got a couple last shout outs here. Aaron Overhead Doors, get out and see those guys, residential and commercial. You want to throw something on your commercial building, you got something on your business, you want to make it pop a little bit, they can make it happen with their garage doors. And remember, this is a wide service area all across Atlanta, up into North Georgia. Give them a call. They'll help you set it up and get you where you need to be. You can call them or text them, 678-960-3360. That's Aaron Overhead Doors, as highly rated of a company as you can find. And again, 10% off for Georgia fans who's doing that. And speaking of Georgia fans, some of the biggest at Your Pie with Drew French. Get by and see those guys. We've mentioned the no contact pickup and how easy they're making all that for you. I think that it's they're doing it as smooth as anybody. I know Roddy's sitting down at the beach right now, upset that he's not being able to dig into a pie. Well, he may be a little bit drunk right now, but
they've got 70 locations. So,
That's true. That's true.
There's got to be one close enough if he's willing to get to it.
That's right. No, I think that, like I said, those guys do such a great job. Get out there and check them out. Load up the toppings. And I tell people this all the time, just because it's the big secret. Get the cheese sticks, man. They got the best cheese sticks in Athens. So
I think they're running a special now that if you use their app for the first time, I think you may get like a cheese pizza for free right now. I think I saw something about that. So
there you go.
Make that happen. Hey, one thing in our YouTube chat during our interview with Amarlo, Dave McMahon, our buddy here with UGA Sports, said between Jake, Dane, and Amarlo, that's 334 career tackles.
Yes, I'm pleased to announce that I was part of the 334 tackles represented there.
Well, I don't tackle people for sure, and that's probably a good thing. But I will say, and you'll know what I'm referring to here, at the end of a game, when all the photographers are getting ready to try to sprint to midfield and get the photo of the coach's handshake, which is so stupid, really, because the coaches don't even talk to each other most of the times. They're just kind of doing it as the formality. I was always one of the first to the middle of the field because I was going to do a dead sprint. And if someone got in my way, I was going to give them the Amarlo Herrera to get my shot. So I've been retired from that game for a few years now, but that's the most athletic feat I had in my, sports director days in local TV.
I like to hang back and get the players walking off. I'll let Roddy get in the scrum and get in there and fight for the shot. But no, I think that it's always a lot of fun down there. And like you said, so much fun to have Amarlo on today. Glad we could talk some Chaz Chambliss as well. Do want to give a shout out to our sponsors as we wrap things up here today. Make sure to get out to Your Pie, 70 locations, Academia Brewing, as good as it's going to get when it comes to beer and food. Speaking of food, get by Classic City Eats. Give those guys your love and business. They got the full place sanitized. They got the menu up over on the website. Everything available to. They'll come out to your car, walk it out there to you, and they got some great family meals out there. So if you're looking to feed a crowd, that's a real good way to please them all. Athens Ford, our good friends over there, as well as Aaron Overhead Doors. And don't forget 11 Alive and 365 Game Day. They're always so gracious to have us on their pages, and we do appreciate them being there. So
do want to give a quick tease too. Anthony Dasher has a pretty cool story and a great interview coming tomorrow. I can't give any more information than that, but UGAsports.com with the Chaz Chambliss commitment, and then a really cool interview that Anthony Dasher has tomorrow. There's some great stuff on UGAsports.com, and even if you want to get in conversations about what's the best reel lawnmower to use on your Bermuda grass, that's happening today on the board. So you can get some, there's a lot of info down there in some of the threads that I did not know much about. I know you're a grill guy, so you can give people the Traeger tips, but I need to learn more about this Bermuda grass.
Yeah, I've also gone there for legal advice. I won't say for what, but there's a little something for everyone on the event. And if you want to get over to the event and check it out, make sure to do so. We've got the free 30 days still running. Free until July 1st, I believe it is.
That's about the 30 days, yeah.
Yeah, so roughly 30 days. And that's UGA Free 2020 on the promo code. So go over, give us a shot, check it out, see what you like, see what you don't. Stick with us through the season. We'll have you fully covered. And the news certainly hasn't stopped flowing, even though the shutdown has been on.
Well, and I think probably in the coming weeks, I'd expect probably the podcast originating from Classic City Eats again at some point. I think that's happening pretty soon. So the show will return to as close to normal, as it can.
Thanks again to Amarlo Herrera for joining us. Dayne, thank you always for helping produce the show and being my co-host today and working with me on it. Appreciate you. You're a lot easier to look at than the other guys. So. But for Dayne Young, I'm Jay Cruz and UGA Sports Live, wrapping it up for this week. Come check us out, UGAsports.com.